Are the Boston Red Sox a legitimate player for Juan Soto this free agency? All of that and more on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And it is completely free. So you might as well check it out because Locked On is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the show. Like I said, I am here Monday through Friday to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, whether that's moves that they make during the season, looking back on games, talking about roster moves, talking about players being active and not active, talking about mid-season trades, and right now talking about rumors. All of it is here on Locked On Red Sox. And speaking of rumors, there are a lot of rumors going around about Juan Soto right now and his next landing spot. And there are several reports that say the Red Sox are very much in play to be able to get Soto. Now, keep in mind, the Red Sox have been in this position before where there have been reports that they were trying to get a certain player and then it didn't work out because that player decided to go elsewhere, or they just didn't offer enough money, or they changed their mind and something else happened. So it's important to remember that you want to take these rumors with a grain of salt, but Jeff Passan has mentioned the Red Sox being a legitimate player for Juan Soto. And according to another baseball reporter, MLB insider Robert Murray from Fansided, he said that the Red Sox absolutely love Juan Soto, which of course, why wouldn't they? We all love Juan Soto, and it would be silly for the Red Sox to not at least try to get somebody like him. So rumor has it that he has narrowed his free agency search down to 4 teams, including the Red Sox, and then also the Yankees, Mets, and Blue Jays. And there are many people who feel like the Yankees and Mets are the favorites right now, but the Blue Jays have a meeting set up this week, and then the Red Sox after that, and then the Mets, and then the Yankees. So it'll be interesting. He likely won't sign until he's done with all of those meetings. But the Red Sox being in that conversation is exciting because honestly, when is the last time a player of that caliber was tied to the Boston Red Sox? It really has been a while because the Red Sox have gone through this phase of not wanting to offer the amount of money that a player of that caliber is commanding in free agency. But remember that Juan Soto is a Scott Boras client, and Scott Boras clients never settle. So I don't think that Boras and Soto would have even agreed to have the meeting with the Red Sox if John Henry and company hadn't said something that indicated that they are willing to hit that number that Juan Soto wants and pay him the number that he is asking for. I don't think that there would even be a meeting with the Red Sox, and that is very promising because that alone, if all of this is true, and I do tend to trust Jeff Passan with his reporting and what he's saying about these teams setting up meetings with Soto, if the Red Sox were a team that he is having a meeting with, that goes to show that maybe they are actually willing to spend that kind of money on him. And I'm going to be talking a little bit later too, more about whether the Red Sox are actually willing to spend this offseason. But Juan Soto is the type of player who would instantly make the Red Sox a lot better of a team. And it doesn't matter if logistically it makes sense because they have an overload of outfielders right now. If you have the chance to get Juan Soto, you get him. I mean, that's just the type of player that he's worth every penny that he's going to get. He's still young and still has quite the career ahead of him. And nobody can sit here and argue that having Juan Soto wouldn't help this Red Sox team. So that being said, so say they offer Juan Soto this crazy amount of money, which he is going to get, by the way. It's not going to be a cheaper contract. And I think there might be some people out there who might be a little bit caught off guard by what he does end up getting. But we know the Red Sox have the money to be able to go out and spend on somebody like Soto. It's just been the last few seasons that they don't want to spend that kind of money. But again, like I said, if Passan is serious about it, which I always tend to agree with him and believe him when he reports these things, I don't think he would make that up. So maybe the Red Sox are finally, changing their tune a little bit. So that amount of money that Soto is going to get, people need to just accept that it is what it is and that he's going to be expensive. And the thing with that is, yes, he's going to be expensive, but you're getting a superstar player out of him. You're not really gambling with a player who you're hoping can turn things around that didn't have a great season, and you're not hoping to get a guy who maybe will perform in the postseason, because guess what? Juan Soto was one of the few guys in the Yankees lineup who consistently performed in the World Series. And that to me is something that's so important. And for the Red Sox to get somebody who's a proven winner and has that kind of exposure is going to be huge for this Red Sox lineup. And not only does bringing him in just instantly make the Red Sox a lot better team, but it also would get the fans more invested, because that's a big, exciting player that the Red Sox can market around. And that would draw fans back into wanting to go to Fenway Park and watch the games. Because honestly, after the last few seasons, there have been people who lost interest in watching this team, and you can't really blame them for that. And bringing Juan Soto here would get Red Sox fans back on that John Henry and company train of, okay, maybe they are turning over a new leaf. And you'd finally get support around Rafael Devers, that there takes a little bit less pressure off of him to be the only guy who is the heart of that lineup, which granted, yes, Devers is the face of the franchise, but for him, if you add somebody like Juan Soto into the lineup, now you have another guy who can kind of share that title and that pressure of being among the best hitters in the lineup. And Soto obviously handles that pressure really well. So that would probably benefit Devers and his game as well. And he automatically would probably hit better because of it, because he doesn't have this sense in the back of his head of, this is all on me. I have to be the guy that steps up for this lineup. So there are plenty of benefits to the Red Sox bringing in Juan Soto, just for a variety of different reasons. But if you look at the flip side of it, if they bring in Juan Soto, that means they will be forced to trade an outfielder or two even, because you have Jarren Duran, Wilyer Abreu, and Cedar Rafaela. You have Roman Anthony in the system, who is the best prospect in baseball and will likely get his shot at some point in 2025 in the majors. So then if they do bring in Juan Soto, then they would have too many outfielders. And why would they keep all of those outfielders on the team when they can flip one of those guys for pitching? I still think even if they don't get Soto, they should try to trade some of those guys for pitching. Probably one of them without Soto, one, maybe two, if they do get Soto. And that could be interesting, because you have Wilyer Abreu, who just won a Gold Glove and is coming off of this tremendous season where he really impressed. So his value is really high right now. So if the Red Sox want to trade him, this would be the offseason to do it. And they could turn him into really strong pitching, which would, again, cause more of a long-term benefit for this Red Sox team, because then they're addressing an area of immediate need. So no, Soto doesn't solve the problem of a right-handed bat. They still would need that. And obviously, he doesn't resolve the pitching issue, which is the Red Sox biggest problem. But if you do sign him, it could be a chain reaction of them moving one of their other outfielders so that they get strong pitching in return. So it could be a big spiral effect. And if they sign Juan Soto, that is a big play. That could amend a lot of the feelings that the Red Sox fans have had towards the ownership group over the last few seasons. And I do feel like this offseason, they finally have heard the frustration from the fans, and they are trying to make a big move to silence us as fans. And Juan Soto could be that silencing move that gets the fans back on ownership's side and back to being invested in this Red Sox team, because this has to be an offseason full of big moves for the Red Sox. And there is no bigger move than Juan Soto. He is the best left-handed hitter on the free agent market, no doubt about it, and arguably the best left-handed hitter in the game right now. And so if you're the Boston Red Sox, you're doing everything you can to acquire a player of that caliber. And it's awesome that the Red Sox have a meeting with him. It shows that they probably are genuinely interested. And I'm sure Boris had them give a price tag before even having the meeting so that he and Soto could decide if it's even worth having it. So that makes me feel a little bit better and feel like there's a little bit more promise to this Red Sox offseason, that maybe they are willing to dish out that type of money for Juan Soto. But I know a lot of people are going to be anxiously waiting throughout the rest of this week to see where he lands and if it's going to be an AL East team or if it's going to be the Mets to try to get them over that hump next year and into the World Series. But coming up, there's a pitcher that the Red Sox are rumored to have been prioritizing this offseason that is their top priority from a pitching standpoint. What does that mean for Boston? I'm going to be discussing that next. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. It's so important to have strategies to win both in sports and in life. And that leading strategy for life is having the best life insurance on your bench with SelectQuote to protect your legacy and your family's future. It's so important to make sure that everything for you stress-wise is taken care of when it comes to the future of your family and yourself. And that's exactly what SelectQuote can do. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers to find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. If you are in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million. No medical exam required. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedon. Go to selectquote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedon. It's actually interesting because I was looking over my life insurance policy earlier that I have through my employer, and it's just so important to think about. So SelectQuote is a place for you if you're stressed about maybe finding the right life insurance plan. Will the Boston Red Sox actually spend this offseason? That is a question I am going to be addressing in a little bit here on today's show, but it's become really apparent and obvious that this needs to be a huge offseason for Boston. They have to make some big moves in order to get themselves back to being in that top tier of teams and that playoff conversation and be a team that can be taken seriously when it comes to their playoff chances. No more trying to cheap out, no more trying to avoid getting bona fide superstars. This is the time to go out and get the guys that they need to get in order to be a true contender. And one of those guys that the Red Sox are rumored to be pushing for right now is Corbin Burnes. He is reportedly their top priority for this offseason so that he can be that true number one starter that the Red Sox have been looking for. They do have a backup option in Blake Snell if they can't get him. So they would pivot to him if it looks like the conversations with Corbin Burnes are stalling or he's leaning towards going elsewhere. Blake Snell would be their second choice. And honestly, neither one is a bad choice, especially for a Boston Red Sox team that has been craving a pitcher of that level to come into their rotation. This past season, Burnes fell off a bit, but he's still very much elite. In 32 games started, he posted a 2.92 ERA with a 15-9 record and 181 total strikeouts. His strikeouts per 9 innings was 8.4, and his walks per 9 was 2.2. So obviously still put up competitive numbers, and he does generate those ace caliber swings and misses, which could be huge for the Red Sox rotation. In terms of Blake Snell, he was injured for a portion of the season and only had 20 starts. In those starts, though, he was 5-3 with a 3.12 ERA and 149 strikeouts. His strikeouts per 9 was 12.5 and his walks per 9 was 3.8. So he does have a little bit of an edge over Corbin Burnes when it comes to his strikeout rate, being able to generate those swings and misses at a higher frequency than Corbin Burnes was getting them. But he also does walk more batters on average over a 9-inning period. And the Red Sox had some problems with walks last year. So that's something to note and maybe be a little bit wary of if they were to bring in Blake Snell. Another thing about Snell for me is, like I mentioned, how he was injured for a portion of the season. Just that injury history with him, he hasn't been able to stay healthy a lot the last few seasons, and that's something I would be a little bit concerned about if they were to bring him in, is what is his health situation going to look like? And is he going to be able to give the Red Sox a full season in that true number one role? I think the thing to consider with Snell is that you can't really look at his 3.12 ERA and judge that as the type of pitcher he is, because he was nasty in the second half. When he came back from injury, he was putting up the best numbers in the league as a starting pitcher. So that's important to consider when you're thinking about which starter you'd prefer. Overall, I think I would prefer Corbin Burnes just because I think we would see him out there more consistently than Blake Snell, but either option would no doubt be the number one starter in the Red Sox rotation. And Max Fried is also another option that the Red Sox are in on too. He's somebody who I would say would be more of the secondary guy, as in if they land one of these other two, maybe you sign him also, because the Red Sox rotation would go from mediocre to one of the best in the league if you add one of these two, either Corbin Burnes or Blake Snell, and then also Max Fried to that rotation. Then you're looking at a rotation that has Corbin Burnes, Max Fried, Tanner Houck, Cutter Crawford, and Brian Bayo, because it already was reported that Nick Pivetta will likely decline that qualifying offer from the Red Sox, and then they would get a draft pick in return, and then he would try to go get more money in free agency. So that is a good rotation. I mean, Tanner Houck is not a number 3. He's much better than a number 3. But if he's your number 3, that goes to show the depth that starting rotation has. Plus, if we see more of second half Brian Bayo that we saw this past year, then you're talking about 4 very solid pitchers. Then you have Cutter Crawford in the mix, who does struggle with the home run ball, but he would likely be the number 5 starter anyway. And then the question would be what they do with Lucas Giolito, but that would allow the Red Sox to have more flexibility when it comes to easing Giolito back in. Like, what if they want to bring him in and not have him start right away and have him pitch out of the bullpen so that he's pitching less innings at a time to make sure that he's fully healthy and ready to go first? This would give them the option to do that. And the only reason I'm hesitant on Max Fried is primarily because of his age. I think with him being on the older side, it's hard to know if he's still going to be able to maintain that same level of competitive fire that he's had in the past. He's obviously experienced and it has that postseason exposure. But what I would be a little bit concerned about is him crumbling or not being able to stay healthy because he is getting on the older side. So that's why I wouldn't want the Red Sox to bank on him as their number 1. If they are interested in Fried, I still think they need another arm to put at the top of the rotation that's a bona fide true ace. They are also linked to being interested in Nathan Eovaldi. Again, people like to call the Red Sox the interest kings because interest a lot of times doesn't exactly pan out when it comes to the Boston Red Sox. But Nathan Eovaldi would not be a bad option to add as reinforcement. Again, cannot be the only move they make from a pitching standpoint, but he could at least provide some reinforcement and some help out of the rotation for the Red Sox. So another name they could possibly acquire, but it sounds like Corbin Burnes is the priority for them, who pitched very well in 2024. Even though he dropped off a little bit, it was still a very solid season, and hopefully he could come back to being the absolutely dominant Corbin Burnes that we saw before, because that would be a huge play for the Boston Red Sox. When you look at their pitching right now, that is what ultimately is going to determine whether they will be a contender or not in 2025. They could add Juan Soto and all the best bats in the world, but that still will not matter if their pitching situation is not secure, especially that starting rotation, which is so important. They need guys who are going to be able to eat innings and provide them lots of length and depth. And they're going to need to revamp the bullpen and get guys in there who are going to be able to be reliable on a day-to-day basis. Because the problem with the Red Sox pen in 2024 was that they didn't have a lot of guys that would come in relief that would be consistent day to day, and you didn't really know what version of that pitcher you were going to get. For example, Cam Boozer or Zach Kelly or Josh Winkowski. Those guys certainly had their moments, but they also had days where they would just completely crumble. And I think the Red Sox just had too many players like that in that bullpen, and it led to them blowing lots of games down the stretch, really starting right after the All-Star break. So when you think about the Red Sox roster, that is ultimately what's going to do it for them. They have no choice. They have to go all out on the pitching this offseason, or else they will not be going anywhere in 2025, because you could have the best hitters in the world on your team, but if you don't have the pitching to go along with that, the problem is that that's relying too much on your offense to be able to score a lot of runs every single night. And the reality is that the offense is not going to be on point every single night. You're going to have days where the offense is struggling and guys aren't getting on base because they might be facing an opposing pitcher who's an absolute stud. And if that's the case, you need to have a pitcher on the mound who's going to keep it a low-scoring game to give the Red Sox a shot to scuffle across some runs and try to win those games. So they need to get the pitching. If they sign Juan Soto, if they are able to get him, or if Corbin Burnes really does come to Boston, I mean, that would be awesome for the Red Sox, but it does start with the pitching, because again, it will not matter what the offense looks like if they don't have the pitching to go around these guys who are going to be able to go out there and not give up a crazy amount of runs every single start. So we'll have to see how all of that goes. And coming up, I'm going to be answering the age-old question. Will the Red Sox actually spend? That's what's going to be talked about next. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You will definitely not be disappointed if you use FanDuel. You can make so many different bets on lots of different sports, even during a game. So make sure you check it out today because it definitely sets people up for success. And I know firsthand because my husband always, every day, bets on something and he gets a good return and makes a good amount of money. So that could absolutely be you too and could be a game changer. What could be a game changer for the Boston Red Sox? Bringing Juan Soto and Corbin Burnes to Boston. Both would be fantastic additions, but that still wouldn't be enough for this team. They do need to continue to add, especially to that bullpen. They can make big moves, but one or two big moves still will not be enough. It certainly will put them in a little bit better of a spot, but if they still have a bullpen that's horrifically bad and is blowing all of these games constantly, then none of it's going to matter what they do when it comes to these big investments that they make. But those big investments come with a cost. They are going to have to be willing to look at those big price tags and not be scared off and not run from it, because this is the season for them to not shy away from that. And we know that they have the money to spend, but the question is, will they? Will the Boston Red Sox actually spend money this offseason? And like I talked about before with Juan Soto, this seems like an offseason more than ever where I feel confident that they are going to be willing to spend money on these bona fide superstars. And it's not that they haven't spent money before. It's just that they were spending money in the wrong places, and they were spending money more on the guys who weren't bona fide superstars, and it resulted in inconsistency and question marks in terms of players that were on the Red Sox roster because they weren't willing to go for that top tier of players. And that's what we've been missing from this Red Sox team the last few seasons. It's not that they aren't willing to have big contracts on the books, because look at Devers. I mean, they extended Devers and gave him this big contract. They spent money on Trevor Story. They spent money on Yoshida. But the problem is, you name these guys and they haven't really branched into that upper echelon of the best of the best. And Juan Soto is in that category of best of the best. And those are the types of players that people still are not convinced that the Red Sox will actually go for, because they don't feel a sense of commitment from the front office and ownership group. And I honestly don't blame people, because the Red Sox actions have shown that they aren't committed to spending on those types of players. So this poses that question of, do we trust that the Red Sox will actually spend? I feel like, based on what I've heard from Craig Breslow, he seems pretty adamant that they have heard the fans and they are ready to spend this offseason. If they really are linked to Juan Soto in this capacity, that obviously means they put a competitive offer out there that they floated to Scott Boras in order for him to at least feel like the meeting was worth having with the Red Sox. And Juan Soto obviously is intrigued for some reason. And don't you think if the Red Sox were lowballing their offer and throwing out numbers that aren't even close to what he's looking for, that he wouldn't even give them the time of day? I mean, most likely. Ultimately, I think for Soto, it's not about the location. It's about the money and who's going to offer him the most money. And I feel like the Red Sox obviously threw a number out there that's intriguing to him and his agent, and that's why they're following up on it and at least having a meeting to see if Boston could be a good fit for him. Another reason why I feel like the Red Sox will actually spend big this offseason is because they realized that their strategy wasn't working. Missing the playoffs 3 straight seasons, finishing in last place 2 out of those 3 years, and even this past year being a very mediocre baseball team, finishing at 500 and obviously having some injuries, but not having enough firepower, especially when it came to the pitching and having so many things go wrong when it came to them blowing games. I think the front office had to see that for themselves again in order to be woken up. And then they went and saw the Yankees go all the way to the World Series after bringing in Juan Soto, and they realized that the Red Sox are not at that same level. And as much as the Yankees going to the World Series was painful, it was great that they ended up losing the World Series so that we as Red Sox fans could be happy. But I think in a way, it was a good thing that their division rival and biggest rival in the sport, for that matter, went to the World Series, because that hopefully served as a wake-up call for this front office that, yeah, we need to do a lot more. And I do feel like this is the offseason in which they are going to do a lot more, because they know how much backlash they are going to get from fans if they don't do a lot more. So I actually feel confident that we will see some big moves made this offseason. I think the Red Sox roster could have a whole new feel to it going into 2025. And that come spring training, Red Sox fans are actually looking forward to see this team and the product on the field in 2025. And I feel like the front office knows that there's a lot of pressure on them to make that happen. And hopefully what people have said resonated with them, even like the 2004 Red Sox, who I talked about on yesterday's show, expressing their thoughts on what they wanted this team to do to be competitive again in 2025. I think there are a lot of people that are in John Henry's ear expressing frustration and expressing what needs to be done. And I think he hears all of that. And I am inclined to feel confident that they're going to apply that to this offseason and give Craig Breslow the green light to go big when it comes to who they acquire. At least they better do that. That's the right answer, an obvious answer as to what they have to do. But me as a fan, I'm just hoping that actually happens. And I'm just going to keep the faith. And like I always say, you as a fan have to keep the faith as well. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Red Sox. I appreciate you making it your first listen today. While we have you, make sure you check out Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, who will keep you up to date with everything going on around Major League Baseball. Now that the stove is heating up and players are in these contract talks, we might see things move pretty quickly. So you'll want to know what's going on with other teams too. So make sure you head to Locked On MLB after this. Go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.